Hey, this is Ask Rob. This is a question show where I take questions from the internet and I answer them in video form. I've made some promises that I'm not going to keep this week to do certain videos. Because I think this is a very pressing topic this week, I'm going to talk about Ebola. So my question this week comes from Maureen, and she writes, "What I'm interested to know more about is the Ebola virus. Exactly how is it contracted, and what are the current cures and preventions, if any? I hear so much about it in the news, but would like to hear the science and facts about it." So that's a really great question, and I've been hearing a lot of false facts in the last few months since this Ebola outbreak in Africa has started, and I thought it would be good to just give you, I'm not a doctor, I don't have any medical expertise, but I know a fair bit about this disease, and I've done some research, and hopefully what I can do is give you a couple minute synopsis, as well as some links, which I'll put in the description below, so that you can get more information if you're interested in more, but hopefully this will give you a brief overview. So Ebola is a very scary disease for a number of reasons. But I want to start off by saying that under the current circumstances, there's very little chance of an Ebola outbreak happening here in North America. So on October 7th, the first person to contract or to be diagnosed with Ebola on US soil died in hospital. This was actually almost an eventuality given the number of people traveling to and from Africa every day, just modern air travel in general, and the number of Ebola cases in Africa right now. However, that doesn't mean the disease is likely to spread here. Ebola's had an outbreak this year that's actually worse than all the previous outbreaks put together that we know about. And in Africa, this is actually a much bigger concern than in North America, because education about diseases like Ebola is very limited in African countries. And so there's not a lot of knowledge about how it spreads and that it even exists and is a big problem. So typically when the virus spreads to a member of a village, they don't really know how to quarantine this person. And so during burial, African customs dictate that people need to spend a lot of time around the body and actually preparing the body for burial. And the disease is transmitted a lot of the time in that way from corpses to family members. So this kind of spread allows a close population, like an African village or a town, it allows the spread of the disease to go really quickly through that town. However, Ebola is not a killer of many people on a large scale compared to other diseases like the flu and like malaria. These diseases can be spread through the air, and they live a lot longer outside of the human body. So getting Ebola means actually having close physical contact with another person who has it and actually exchanging some kind of bodily fluid with them. It's also not possible to get the disease unless you're getting it from someone who is actually symptomatic. The disease tends to incubate in a human for about 21 days before becoming symptomatic. They've also said it's rare, even in cases where there's direct contact, to actually transmit the disease. It's very rare to actually get that kind of transmission just in everyday contact. As for potential treatments and or cures, there has been a little bit of progress, but mixed results mostly. Because there have been very limited cases of Ebola, that means there also hasn't been a lot of research on the topic. There is an experimental drug that was produced in collaboration with a lab in Canada, as well as a lab in the States, called ZMapp, which has shown promising results. ZMapp has been given to patients that have Ebola right now, and it showed mixed results. It's hard to say right now whether it's actually making a difference because the death rate of Ebola is so high, but it definitely doesn't prevent it, or it definitely doesn't cure it outright. So for obvious reasons, during this difficult time especially, it's very difficult to do clinical trials. We'll have to see the effects of this treatment after the fact or on an ongoing basis. There's no way to do trials right now. Some strains of Ebola are actually known to kill up to 90% of the people who get it. North Americans are sending as much of the drug as they can to Africa and to hospitals that are treating Ebola patients that have been flown back right now, and so they're doing everything they can. It's actually really unfortunate that nurses and doctors from the States that have been working overseas in Africa trying to contain Ebola are coming down with the disease, and there are a number of prominent Ebola researchers in Africa that have also been killed by the disease this year. There has been a little bit of promise, though, in that preliminary tests are showing that it might be possible to at least treat or cure the disease by giving blood from people who have immunity to it, people who survive it, by transferring blood to patients and using those antibodies to fight the disease. So that's the basics of the disease we're calling Ebola. If you want to learn more, I'll be putting lots of links in the description below. You can check those out and give you lots of the latest news and that kind of stuff. Try to avoid the 24-hour news cycle, as it's going to try to scare you to get more viewing. but there's lots of good information at places like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and the internet is actually a really good resource for things like this. If you have more questions about Ebola or just another interesting question, feel free to ask me at askrob@robitrel.com, or head to robitrel.com and click on the Ask Rob button to ask me another question. If you want to share something with me on Twitter or Facebook or Google+, you can also find me at robitrel. All right, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.